Welcome. Please join us for a rethinking of healthy weight. It's not about calories. It is about the quality of what you eat, when you eat it, with whom you eat it. So come learn what I have learned about how to get back to a healthy weight. Not too many years ago, I weighed about 65 pounds more, and I was getting to be fluffy. And I want to teach you what I have learned that is a rethinking of healthy weight having to do with healthy hormones, healthy digestion, eating the foods that you can digest, assimilate, and eliminate without immune burden, knowing what biomarkers are risk factors and what are just informational but not really to change your life. So come change your life. Be healthy at weight for life. Join us. Let's talk about the Alkaline Way to healthy weight and why we're referencing a lifetime of choices. What does choices have to do with it? Isn't it about calories and genomics and genes and habits? Well, yes, it's about habits. And to tell you what I'm going to tell you, healthy weight has to do with turning glucose sugar, a common sugar, into energy with the help of a hormone called insulin. And when that system gets sluggish, you end up with metabolic syndrome or syndrome X, and I'm going to talk about how to reverse that, and insulin resistance and how to overcome that, and mitochondrial dysfunction and how to repair and be repaired from mitochondrial energetic dysfunction. I'm also going to explain that inflammation is really repair deficit, and that obesity has to do with insulin resistance and inflammation repair deficit connections. And then I'm going to tell you what to do about it. It has to do with immune defense and repair system, how tolerant is our immune defense and repair system, how resilient and robust is our microbiome, our digestive tract. Can we turn environmental toxins into water-soluble materials to excrete? We're going to talk about an overburdened immune system. Hidden, delayed hypersensitivity, what we used to call DTH, delayed type hypersensitivity, delayed allergies. And most importantly, I'm going to explain the Alkaline Way lifestyle to survive 21st century intoxication, both metabolic and environmental, both inside and outside. And I'm going to share with you classic wisdom about cultivating the habits of health for life, regardless of the season of your life, regardless of the history, regardless of the family history. And so I am Russell Jaffe. I'm a physician scientist. I maintain a fellow status in a half a dozen different disciplines and societies. I'm a senior fellow at the Health Studies Collegium Foundation. I'm founder and chairman of PERC and PERC Integrative Health and ELISA Act, LRA, Lymphocyte Response Assay, LRA Test Biotechnologies, Functional Immunology, and ARMJHRX. You can reach me by email, you can reach me online, you can reach me in a variety of ways, and I'd like to share with you a half century that I have distilled into the next roughly 50 minutes. Now let's start at the beginning. Obesity is a modern tragedy. It's a national epidemic. It inflicts higher medical costs and lowers quality of life. To be quantitative, in 2016, the costs were almost $500 billion. In the United States alone, $480 billion of excess medical costs were attributed to obesity. Now let's look back just a generation. In 1985, you see that there were states that were light blue, quite lean, and blue, still moderately lean. And if we fast forward to 2015 to 17, notice the most obese state in 1985 was leaner than the leanest state in 2015. So we have really gained nationally and by region. And yes, Colorado is a little better and Hawaii a little better than average, But most states and most citizens of this country are in the yellow, orange, red zone, which means trouble, bigger trouble, and oh my gosh, a lot of trouble. Now let's talk about measurements. There's a classic measurement and there's a self-assessment that actually I think is quite worthwhile. If you want to know how fat or obese you are, you want to know about your body mass. And so the body mass index was developed. And what we say is 18.5 to 25 is quite okay. 25 to 30 is overweight, marginal, but more than 30, and there's too many people with a BMI of more than 30, is obese. However, there's also a self-assessment you can do without any complications, and that's the waist to height ratio. And that's valuable in its own right. So you measure the circumference of your waist with a measuring tape, and you use the same measuring tape to measure how tall or your height. And the ratio, waist to height, is a useful measure, highly valuable, predictive. And then if you do one more thing, which is you stand in front of a full-length mirror and you wiggle your abdomen and you see if there's additional jiggling on the part of your fat in your abdomen. And when you wiggle and then jiggle, you're getting close to fluffy, and that means too much fat stored, and you're not as lean as would be healthier. And so waist to height ratio is one measure, fat distribution is another. And they are self-assessments, but predictive assessments, worthwhile to do. Now let's understand the concept of this metabolic syndrome thing. It's sometimes called syndrome X, metabolic syndrome, and the causes include cell acidosis, which means a lack of magnesium and potassium inside the cell. That's very common. Maldigestion, that means you don't break your foods down completely in the gut. That's very common. Dysbiosis, that means the microbial ecology, the kinds of bugs in your gut, are not the healthy proportion. In fact, there's a lack of the good ones and probably too much of the bad ones that have filled the place of the lack of the good ones. Processed diet, the more we process the food, the unhealthier it gets. Sedentary lifestyle, sitting is the new smoking. And immunotoxins, especially those that come in either from the air or those that come in through the gut, but those that provoke and increase the immune defense and repair burden, and we'll talk about that. But the consequences, the consequences of this include all of the above. And each of the above is a major category of ill health and of chronic disability. And what we say is that all of these actually are members of a family. They link together. Notice the oval that circumscribes them. So whether you're focused on abnormal fats in the blood or blood vessel atherosclerosis and hardening of the arteries or diabetes and all the cardiovascular and stroke and other consequences of that and hypertension, high blood pressure, and obesity. Now, let's talk about the diagnostic criteria. And then we'll get on to how come and what to do about it. So there are classic medical criteria. More than 1/3 of Americans, that's more than 100 million Americans, actually qualifies as having metabolic syndrome. And that means your blood sugar is higher than it should be. You have truncal obesity. And that in turn means that your blood sugar is more than 100 rather than less than 75. It means your waist circumference in men is more than 40 inches and women more than 35 inches. It means your HDL-C or your beneficial cholesterol is down. In men, that means less than 40, in women, less than 50. Up goes your blood pressure. and that means more than 130 over more than 85, although the most recent guidelines suggest lowering those levels and treating earlier and more aggressively because the ravages of blood pressure elevation are increasingly clear. And then increase of triglycerides or blood lipids, more than 150 milligrams per deciliter. Now, these are classic measures, and stay tuned for insights that will rethink the whole issue and help you manage all of these risk factors, but by the choices you make in regard to what you eat and drink, think, and do. So, if we want to define obesity, it has to do with metabolic syndrome, syndrome X, it has to do with insulin resistance, it has to do with cardiovascular and atherosclerotic and stroke risks. And the quote is that obesity includes a cluster of cardiovascular risk factors and metabolic alterations associated with excess fat to lean weight. Humans are one of the few species that actually stores fat so that when we go through famine, we will survive. But when we go from when we go from feast to the next feast, or when we're overfed and undernourished, very often we will put significant amount of caloric fat, of energy, potential energy, in our fat pads. And that impedes us, that harms us. Is metabolic syndrome and obesity related issues rising? Well, this slide actually says yes. And this even parses by whether you're white or black, whether you're Mexican American or Hispanic American, whether, you see on the left men, on the right women, and then within each category, you see 1988 to 1994, you see 1999 to 2006, you see 2007 to 2012. And what do we learn from this? Well, we're not making progress. In fact, we're actually slipping down the slippery slope, men and women, in all categories. If you look at those bars, the comparison says that we're developing more and more insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome, and obesity-related issues. Now, the major abnormalities we're talking about are obesity, especially central body or visceral or gut fat, hypertension, where the new criteria reinforce the message of keeping your blood pressure down and very actively working to reduce it with lifestyle as well as whatever else is needed. Insulin resistance or hyperinsulinemia, where the insulin level goes up but the function goes down, either because the receptor at the cell is bad or altered and not functioning properly, or because the body is making antibodies against insulin because the insulin has taken on environmental toxins, toxic metals like mercury or lead come to mind, and that changes the shape of the insulin, and now the body senses this as an abnormal invader and produces antibodies against insulin. So you measure the insulin and it's there, it's just not working because an antibody has bound to it. The fourth abnormality is the sugar intolerance. You're sweet enough as you are. I don't think you should add any sugar to your diet. And we can show you how to make choices about diet and lifestyle so that your blood sugar level stays low and healthy and your cells stay energetic and happy. The last major abnormality, and you may know about this, is dyslipidemia, which means too much fat in the wrong place, and oxidative risk, which means molecules that damage and deplete and deprive you of the beneficial antioxidants and the essential nutrients that your body must take in and that you need to do well and survive. Now I'd like to share with you a rethinking about insulin resistance. The reductionist, the classic medical methodology leads to the conclusion that genetics leads to obesity, that genetics leads to inactivity, that this has to do with how old you are, not how young you are. And the consequence, as you see on the bottom of the slide, is type 2 diabetes and hypertension, dyslipidemia, atherosclerosis, NASH, and PCOS. This is too much fat in the liver and these hormone disruptive syndromes that are far too common today. Now, I would like to show you our rethinking at the Health Studies Collegium. Now, we agree with the consequences, but what we say is that epigenetics, much more than genetics, influences your weight, that age is an innocent bystander. It's the functional age, not the chronology, that's important. That inactivity has more to do with epigenetic habits, habits of daily living, than it has to do with something built in. So insulin resistance has many consequences, and when you rethink it, there is much opportunity to reverse insulin resistance and restore resilience. Now, with regard to insulin lack and cells starve when there's a lack of insulin, and then they reach for fat as a fuel. And what you see on the left is without insulin, the receptors are not bringing the sugar in, and as it says in the lower right of the left side of the slide, glucose remains outside the cell. Now the right side of the slide shows that when insulin is present, the receptor sends a signal, and now the sugar, the glucose, comes in the cell. The sugar is represented by those, there are hexagons. Now, obesity is related to insulin resistance. It is related to inflammation. But insulin resistance is an immunologic functional problem, and inflammation is repair deficit. So let's look at this together. Yes, from the top, obesity is related to all three: skeletal muscle problems, fat, adipose problems, and liver organ problems. And when we say liver, we include spleen and kidney. And as you see the arrows flowing towards the middle of the bottom, the consequence, the result, is systemic insulin resistance and inflammation. Now, much of modern medicine is at war with systemic insulin resistance and inflammation. And what we wanted to show you the fundamental and underlying causes, and then how to reverse the consequences, and then how to know that you're doing the right thing. So let's first look at the interrelationships in regard to what's called the neuroimmunohormonal axis. That is neurochemical, immune defense and repair, and hormonal, because they are three aspects of one control system in the human body. And you see in the center enlarged adipose cells, because they are fat cells. So they're fat cells that have too much fat inside them. And if you start on the right, you see that an increase in leptin increases your appetite, which increases how much you eat. This increases the fatty acids in the blood, and that increases the atherosclerosis risk. Continuing around to the bottom, it increases inflammatory markers, including TNF, IL-6, and CRP. And we particularly recommend measuring again, and over time repeating the high sensitivity CRP, HSCRP, as one of the 8 biomarkers, predictive biomarkers, that we want to keep at their best outcome goal value. If you continue around, there's an increase in angiotensin, and that relates to blood pressure and vascular compliance and autonomic function. There's an increase in sympathetic nervous system. That means an increase in adrenaline, more than serotonin. And if you look at the top, it's an increase in resistin, which is another hormone that has to do with insulin resistance, and that raises blood sugar in its own right. So this interrelationship between neurochemistry, immune defense and repair, and hormones is very important. Now let's start at the bottom of this slide. Xenobiotics, this includes xenotoxins, consume needed nutrients. They're known as persistent organic pollutants. POPs is the acronym. And now let's look at the top of the slide. These are endocrine disruptors. That means hormone disruptors. That means they're hypertensinogens, they're obesogens, they're carcinogens. Oh gosh, and they're diseasogens. Oh dear. And on the left, what it says is these are mitochondrial toxins, and they interfere with metabolism, so they are metabogens. Oh dear, oh dear. Now, what is the evidence that links diet to these issues? Well, it turns out that toxic eating foods that you're not tolerant to, that you have digestive issues with, happens in over half of people. And often they don't know it yet. And that can lead to retention of excess calories and obesity. It can lead to mood disorders and distress. It can lead to insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. It can lead to infection, hospitality, and chronic pathogen expression. It can lead to repair deficit known as inflammation. We advocate functional detoxification, and I suggest that here is a source that confirms the need. Well, this document from the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve and so forth and so on, and the N. Haynes study, a longitudinal study, over just 100 years, the industrial chemicals have increased more than 15-fold. That's 1,500%. That's unprecedented. And we are now, in retrospect, learning how many biological effects these chemicals have as unexpected, unforeseen problems. Now, if you look at all pregnant women, the blood in the umbilical cord shows they've been exposed to 43 or more xenotoxins, environmental toxins, many of them hormone disruptors. What is the meaning of this low-level exposure? Because it is often synergistic, that is multiplicative, rather than even additive. And what we suggest is being proactive about getting the bad stuff out and the good stuff in, and we'll explain to you in a few minutes how to do that. So, with regard to healthy weight management, you want to reduce the burden on your immune defense and repair system so it can repair you, and then your body can lose the extra fluid, lose the extra pounds. LRA by ELISA Act is functional and predictive. It breaks this dysfunction cycle, and we offer it and recommend it. We also include nutritional interventions to stimulate repair. For example, balanced meals that are more alkaline, that are complex carbohydrate rich, low glycemic load, fiber rich, protein containing, and have just enough fat for what you need. And my suggestion is to not add edible oils to your diet. Now, the Alkaline Way includes using a biodynamic or organic CSA, community-supported agriculture, so that the quality of your foods is better, the contamination is lower. We also recommend personalized or individualized nutrient supplementation so that the sugar insulin function is more efficient, so that fat can get burned out and away from the cells, specifically carnitine fumarate and GABA. Now, carnitine is the shovel that brings the fat fuel to the furnace of the cell. In the fumarate form, it's even more beneficial because the bioavailability is much better and it alkalinizes and energizes the cell battery. And GABA is important, working synergistically with carnitine to improve both your lean state and your mood. We also include and recommend adrenal adaptogenic support, and I'll talk in a few minutes about why that is so important and why so many people have overstimulated and exhausted adrenals, and why that is something up with which you should not put. Now, a healthy immune system means no allergies, it means immune tolerance. It means you can neutralize infections and allergens and anything foreign that comes in. It means that your immune system defends and then repairs from daily wear and tear. And there are 50 billion of these wiggly dendritic WBC white blood cells that each can recycle 50 pathogens per cell when they're energetic, when they have enough ascorbate and magnesium, when they have enough of the essentials so that they're doing their job and don't run out of energy. Now, an old-fashioned test we recommend is the phagocytic index. It's a lab test to assess how many bacteria or foreign particles a white cell can ingest in a certain period of time. And I'd recommend the phagocytic index to check if your average white cells are consuming 50 or so pathogens or not. Because an overburdened immune system means the immune defense and repair system is doing too much defense work and is not able to devote enough attention to repair, an imbalance. In that situation, immune dysfunction and disease emerges, often autoimmune, self-attacking. And we want you to be able to restore tolerance and competence in your body. But first, let's understand this hypersensitivity, this delayed allergy. Now, there is both acute and delayed allergy. The immediate allergies are type 1. They're measurable in the serum by a RAST IgE test. They're known as histaminic because histamine causes release of the granules in people who are sensitized, and those granules have the active substances that induce hives or wheezes or itching or anaphylactic shock. And then there are the delayed allergies, types 2, 3, and 4. Type 2 being reactive antibody B-cell mediated, and it could be IgA, IgM, or IgG, but the important thing here is that the antibody could be a beneficial neutralizing antibody, a surveillance neutralizing helpful antibody, or it could be a reactive complement fixing harmful antibody. Just measuring the antibody presence and amount doesn't tell you anything at all about function. And we urge you to use a functional ex vivo LRA, lymphocyte response assay, to distinguish helpful from harmful antibodies. Type 3, immune complex. This is IgM, anti-IgG antigen. Vasculitis, temporal arteritis are classic examples of another aspect of delayed allergy, measurable in the ex vivo LRA system, but few others. And then there's type 4, T-cell mediated. It turns out that T cells react without antibodies and are more important in delayed allergy. So from our point of view, you need accurate and comprehensive testing. Type 2, 3, and 4 must be measured. Ex vivo would be even better, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Delayed and hidden allergies are hard to identify by history. They're hard to identify, and impossible actually to identify, by classic physical IgG chemistry serology. This is where cell culture becomes very important because the cells distinguish helpful from harmful. The cells, if you understand how to communicate with them, tell a story. Now, what about these hidden immune burdens? The important takeaway is it's from 3 hours to 3 weeks after exposure that the affliction, that the symptoms appear. And what that means is that the most careful history and diet diary will not give you the information you need about what's triggering what, what's causing what. Here again, an ex vivo lymphocyte response assay would be really helpful. And it's available. LRA by ELISA Act, LRA of less than 3% variance on blind split samples. It is ex vivo. It does involve directly observing the lymphocytes under conditions similar to what happens in the body. All 3 delayed allergy pathways are measured. Few false positives. Highly reproducible. Indeed, as you see at the top, less than 3% variance on thousands of consecutive blind split samples reported at experimental biology at the American Society for Investigative Pathology. And if you see on the right, on the top, non-reactive lymphocytes, kind of looks like Starry Night. Down below, reactive lymphocytes, and you see a rim of light around each of those lymphocytes, a kind of halo. Now what's happened is the activated cell that has recognized the antigen in question as something it's sensitized to has sent out kinase messages that have phosphorylated the glycocalyx, the surface of these cells, and pushed away the plasma and platelets and created this white space. I include these pictures to show you the difference between reactive and non-reactive lymphocytes in this system, because there are people who don't do cell culture who will tell you it's really hard, and it's hard to even measure an endpoint. And we've been measuring accurately the endpoints for the last 35 years, and we want you to want you to know that this is made available to you. Now, we've also done important outcome studies, significant statistically, meaningful for human beings living their lives. For example, in regard to diabetes, there is a loss of tolerance in diabetics. We took people who were already at best standard of care according to the ADA, American Diabetes Association. And in just 6 months of best effort, there was a 1%, greater than 1% decrease in hemoglobin A1C in both the type 2 diabetes and type 1 diabetes sufferers. And there was an 18% reduction in the insulin levels in the type 2 diabetics. That means insulin was more efficient. That means less stress on the pancreas. That means the cells were working energetically better. And if you just look at a 1% decrease in hemoglobin A1C, you're talking about many years to decades of added quality of life at very low risk and cost. Now, in the case of our lab, we have more than 70,000 cases over the last 30 plus years. And we know how to interpret the results and are happy to explain what the meaning of the results is and what to do about it to restore tolerance and well-being. So we want a balance between defense and repair. In regard to our immune defense and repair system, we want to eat what we can digest, assimilate, and eliminate without immune burden. For me, this includes a wide variety of organic or biodynamic alkaline-forming foods, eaten in a variety of herbally enriched and yummy, savory ways. It also means being guided by our individual immune tolerance LRA tests, which means we substitute for the reactive substances while we restore tolerance to them through improving digestion, metabolism, detoxification, etc. Now, how do we improve ourselves and reduce the risks in this intoxicated 21st century? Here we offer 6 recommendations. I'm going to go through each one and then review them. First, we recommend a personal C cleanse using 100% L-ascorbate, fully buffered and fully reduced. And you can look up C cleanse online. You can look at our references. You look at Jaffe C cleanse. And what we want to know is how much oxidative burden you're under and therefore how much antioxidant does it take to cleanse and help the body remove these oxidative risk factors, molecules. In the middle of the top, you see the dark fruits known as superfoods. This happens to be a pomegranate, but any of the red to blue berries and fruits and vegetables, the dark ones. They are all polyphenolic rich. We particularly recommend quercetin dihydrate and soluble OPC. We have that available in Perk Pain Guard. And then we add evaporated pomegranate juice to create Perk Repair Guard. Then you want to have, as you see in the upper right, number 3, the B-methyl cofactors. We want a balance of natural forms of B vitamins, the usual ones that you know of, but including folate and pantothenic acid and PABA, the full B complex of natural forms. And then in the lower left, you want to combine these ascorbate antioxidants with live juices. We recommend the macerated Huron juicer. Gets more juice and gives you fiber that we recommend incorporating back into your diet, because we often need more fiber than we're getting, and yet we might enjoy a vitamin C enriched green drink. In the low middle, you see the high sulfur foods. The acronym is GGOBE: garlic, ginger, onions, brassica sprouts, and eggs. These should be staples in your diet. And on my most recent LRA tests, I reacted to garlic. So I'm now avoiding garlic, which is a challenge. And I'm eating more ginger and onions and brassica sprouts and eggs. And the lower right, you want to have butyrates in your diet. That's a fuel source for the colon. And you want healthy fats, EPA and DHA, but healthy fats that have been distilled under nitrogen. And the reason you want distilled under nitrogen is because these are delicate molecules where air and oxygen damage them. And the other reason you want to distill under nitrogen is to remove toxic metals and other pollutants. So we recommend the EPA DHA, EPA for body and brain, DHA for brain and body. And I know there are people who say, well, you can take the precursors. No, actually you can't, because the enzymes that convert the inactive precursor to the EPA DHA are themselves very sensitive to poisoning. So I recommend taking the active forms, the EPA DHA. And I recommend you take enough to balance out the omega-6 in your diet. So if you reduce fried foods, if you reduce crisp foods, if you reduce the omega-6 in your diet, then you need less omega-3 supplementation. You can measure with the omega-3 index where your balance point is. And we recommend, we agree with Bill Harris that more than 8% on the omega-3 index is desirable. And I will tell you in passing that my recent one was 13%, and that suggests that I'm doing some things right. Now, with regard to healthy weight management, get enough of the good stuff in. And in regard to supplementation, starting from the left, you see MDP Guard. That's the carnitine fumarate GABA that will help the fat be metabolized and the toxins get out of the mitochondrial battery. Then, next is Adreno Distress Guard. And Perk Adreno Distress Guard is a combination of herbs and nutrients that distinctively support adaptogenically and rehabilitate the adrenals, not stimulate an exhausted gland. Then there's Perk Glucose Regulation Guard Forte. And this helps you restore sensitivity to insulin and blood sugar levels, generally bringing them down into healthier ranges. And on the right side, you see the combination of Perk Mag Plus Guard and Perk Choline Citrate. And when you take 2 capsules of Perk Mag Plus Guard and concurrently a teaspoon of choline citrate in the liquid or beverage of your choice, you enhance the uptake and you chaperone the delivery of the magnesium to the cells that are desperately hungry for it. The choline balances out inositol at the cell membrane. It becomes acetylcholine in the brain, a helpful neurotransmitter, and it becomes cholinergic bile salts that are more soluble, that are more flowing, that help remove toxic matter from the liver. In addition, now let me review. To get the good stuff in, we want pro-repair nutrients including micellized carnitine fumarate, adrenal adaptogenic herbs, healthy glucose-insulin balance. With regard to the glucose regulation, the PERC Glucose Regulation Guard Forte, you can either use hemoglobin A1C or blood sugar results to monitor, make a stable blood sugar, enhance the sugar glucose transport and the cell energy efficiently and effectively with an easy to swallow, pretty green soft gel. PERC Glucose Regulation Guard Forte is a symbiotic sugar regulating set of herbs plus some other minerals, micellized for better uptake. In fact, 3 times better uptake. And we at PERC have micellized for years to create soft gels that create better bioavailability, easier uptake, more efficient use, and people feel those differences. Now there's French lilac, bitter melon, huckleberry or bilberry, and this reduces insulin resistance, it lowers blood sugar levels physiologically. And then there's chromium for enhanced sugar tolerance factor action. There's vanadium in a bioavailable form for independent sugar glucose regulation. And because Agnus castus is helpful to the HPA, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal hormone regulation axis, we include that because stress is related to blood sugar, and blood sugar levels and efficiency of insulin action are related to our stress management. So we think ahead, we have novel formulations, many of them micellized into interesting soft gels. Now, with regard to adrenal fatigue and insulin resistance, there is an intimate relationship between adrenal hormones and insulin function. Blood sugar levels and internal stress are intimately related. So when cortisol levels are down, it slows energy production. So a quick little burst of cortisol can give you a short-term energy. But if your cortisol stays up for too long, you'll get exhausted. And that's what happens to too many people. Their cortisol goes up and stays up, when in fact it should go up briefly and come back down and rest. Increase of insulin levels means the cells need more sugar and more energy, more glucose to get energy. And when the cells become resistant to insulin, either because the receptors are distorted or because the insulin has anti-insulin antibodies, then the pancreas has to work harder, that digestive organ near the stomach has to work harder to increase the insulin levels. And the result of doing this together is that healthy energy levels rise and illness, hospitality, or risk decreases. Now, PERC Adrenal Distress Guard is a unique combination to balance out cortisol and DHEA and improve that neurohormonal rhythm. And it's a unique bringing together of rhodiola, standardized magnolia and philodendron, micellized in perilla oil. You may not have ever heard, but perilla oil is really helpful in the adrenal rehabilitation, and MCT, medium chain triglyceride, to alkalinize as well as enhance the uptake. This supports healthy cortisol to DHEA balance, and it promotes relaxation, feelings of well-being, and resilience. Now let us look at an example in just 6 weeks of improving insulin function. This deserves a little explanation. On the left, in the blue, you see the GI or glucose insulin ratio, where higher is better. And on the right, you see the red or maroon, and there it's called HOMA, which is homeostatic model assessment of efficiency of sugar insulin metabolism, and lower is better. And this is an example, a typical example actually, an individual who for 6 weeks took PERC adrenal distress guard and had an improvement in their insulin function. In fact, when we look on the left, the glucose to insulin ratio went from 3.89 to 6.25, which means 38% better. And if you look on the right, with regard to the HOMA, it went from 5.72 down to 4.1, or 28% improvement in just 6 weeks on PERC adrenal distress guard, to make the point that it has a collateral benefit in regard to sugar, insulin, energy. Now, with regard to PERC MDP guard, it's based on the novel carnitine fumarate, the 100% L-carnitine, carnitine being the shovel to bring the fat to the furnace of the cell. It also includes GABA, which is a nerve communication or neurotransmitter molecule. In fact, when you have healthy carnitine levels and GABA, then during sleep, growth hormone is released, and more robustly. So the best way to get more growth hormone is to take PERC MDP guard. Growth hormone does improve fat burning and helps us stay at lean muscle mass. So PERC MDP guard has many benefits, starting with improving fat metabolism, but including healthier growth hormone levels. MCT, medium chain triglycerides, are alkalinizing in the cell, and they enhance fat metabolism. And then kelp, sea vegetables, so that you get biological iodine for better thyroid hormone production and function. And because we micelize all these together, you get 3 times the absorption, 300% better uptake, because of the PERC MDP guard micellized soft gel. So what is the supplement program we recommend for healthy weight management? Well, it includes PERC glucose regulation guard, as you see in the upper left, 2 to 4 soft gels daily before meals, with the goal of a blood sugar between 70 and 100 milligrams per deciliter, or a hemoglobin A1C less than 5%. And I'm glad to let you know that my most recent hemoglobin A1C was 4.5%, so it is possible to attain this best outcome range or value. Now, PERC adrenal distress guard, 2 to 4 soft gels a day, to reset stress responses and hormones so that DHEA and cortisol are in balance. And the third in the lower left, PERC MDP guard, the metabolipid detox plus, 6 to 8 soft gels a day, the carnitine fumarate and GABA burns fat for energy. So what is the message here? What is the takeaway? What is it that you can practice in your home and in your travels and in your life to save your life? And if you share this with your friends, save theirs. Well, alkalinized for life is a phrase we use. A colleague of mine wrote a book called Alkalinize or Die about the same message. So first, you want to eat a wide variety of foods of high quality, that means organic or biodynamic, and they should be whole foods made fresh. And of course it means eating the foods that you can digest, assimilate, and eliminate without immune burden. When you're healthy, 60% alkaline foods to maintain health. When you're recovering, 80% alkaline-forming foods to recover. More than 60% plant-based in terms of your calories. More than 60% should be complex carbs. And about 20% or so fat, 20% protein. That gives you plenty of fiber, which most people don't get. That gives you enough probiotics and fermented foods that most people don't get. That gets you the symbiotics, the recycled glutamine that energizes and repairs the enterocytes that line the gut. So just by following the alkaline way in diet gets you probiotics, prebiotics, and then you can add the symbiotics where the glutamine energizes but gets recycled so that glutamate never builds up. Water is your drink of choice, and I mean all herbal beverages. Staying away from sugared or artificially sweetened, staying away from anything that's not herbal and water. And then the healthiest, hard, mineral-rich water that you can access. Now, globally, in terms of cuisine choice, the Greek Mediterranean diet is particularly commendable. Traditional Japanese diet is so. And so is a Native American diet in its classic form, which means what I said above. Whole foods prepared together with lots of savory herbs and shared with those you love. Now, when we talk about this alkaline way, this includes the effect of foods on body chemistry. And here you can download this table. On the right, you see 4 columns that are more alkaline. That's what we recommend. 60 to 80% should be the amount on your plate. And the balance amount, the left side, those columns for the more acid foods. So it's not about being 100% alkaline. It is about eating within your nature, eating the foods that you can digest, assimilate, and eliminate, eating for life. Fiber, 40 to 100 grams a day. The benefits of increasing fiber intake are that insulin is more efficient, leptin levels go down, and so does weight. Another self-assessment we often recommend is a gastrointestinal GI transit time. The average today is between 36 to 96 or more hours. That means a day and a half to many days, giving time for toxins to be reabsorbed, toxins that drain metabolism, leading to chronic GI ill health and systemic illness as well. Indeed, when I was a young scientist and a young physician, I was taught that there's a silent epidemic of gastrointestinal diseases that underlies most chronic ill health. Healthy transit time is 12 to 18 hours. What you eat at night for dinner should come out the next morning. And if it comes out too quick, that can mean that you have malabsorption and malnutrition, which means you're not able to extract the nutrient value, and that's a different kind of issue with which we can deal. Now, after the urine sits in the bladder for 6 or more hours, it equilibrates with the cells, and now you have one time a day where you can measure the acidity or the pH of the urine and be guided. And what you want is the middle healthy restore zone. In other words, the color strip will be green and your pH will be between 6.5 and 7.5. Below 6.5, you had too much acid and too little magnesium mineral. And as you see on the left, if the color is sandy, you are progressively more acidic. It's a logarithmic scale, so small changes have big meaning. The difference between 6.5 and 5.5 is tenfold. The difference between 6.5 and 4.5 is 100-fold. So small changes in pH have an important meaning, and you want to have enough minerals, magnesium in particular, to keep your first morning urine pH in the 6.5 to 7.5 range. Now, if you were above 7.5 consistently, that strip would be blue, and that might be catabolic illness, and that's another issue that we can deal with. Contact us if that's the case. Now, with regard to first morning urine pH as a predictive biomarker, it gives you a non-invasive measure of cell acidosis, of mineral status inside the cell, and we know that enzymes, the cell catalysts, are exquisitely pH sensitive. So small changes in pH towards the acid side have profound consequences in terms of cell metabolism. For example, when cells are healthy and alkaline, then when protein is synthesized, the efficiency is more than 90%. And when cells are a bit acidic, the proteins aren't properly produced and folded, they're not active in the right way, they don't pass cellular quality control, and maybe less than 10% is proper, and 90% has to get recycled. That's a big metabolic burden on the cell. And a lot of this relates to what we see in the lower left. Mg++ is the acronym or the symbol for magnesium, the forgotten electrolyte that we need to remember, and we need to take in enough magnesium with the choline citrate, PerkMag Plus Guard and Percholine citrate, to keep that morning urine pH in the healthy 6.5 to 7.5 range. Now, a few more points. First of all, the mind and body are always connected. Mindfulness practices are important. And what you see here on the left are people doing Tai Chi or Tai Chi Chuan. In the middle, someone practicing Hatha Prana Yoga, 2 of the 7 forms of yoga that we would recommend. And you might, if you're new to this, experiment until you find a pattern or a form or a technique to which you are attracted, and then practice, practice, practice. And on the right, you see if you do this with people you like or love, there's additional benefits, neurohormonal benefits, endorphin benefits. So the mind, body, and spirit are connected. They always are connected. Everything that affects your mind affects your body. Everything that affects your body affects your mind. And so we want to bring all of this together, and we have, in The Joy of Living, the Alkaline Way, and the program that includes LRA by ELISA ACT tests as part of predictive biomarker, and PERK integrative health approaches to a new generation of 21st century supplements. Now, I promised some classic wisdom, and I'd like to share 7 insights with you. Number 1, start each meal with a few slow, deep breaths of appreciation or gratitude. Number 2, have something warm and wet to start. Number 3, eat until you're half full, wait 5 minutes. When you want more, enjoy. Now, in those 5-minute respite, you might want to reflect inside, you might want to visit with people you like, you might want to stay away from screens, but you might want to be more self-aware. Number 4, eat most of your calories from dawn till midday. This allows your digestion to be more efficient and repair itself in the 3/4 of the day that you're not eating. And now you have joined the what's called intermittent fasting health promotion approach in a very elegantly simple but simply elegant way. Number 5, Evening is the time for salads, whole fruit, and a few nuts. Now, by salads, I mean naked salads. I mean beautiful, fresh, but undressed salads. I mentioned, and I want to reinforce, that edible oils have no place in my diet, and I don't think they have a need in your diet. You can cook with broth and wine. You can cook with many different natural ways other than oil. And stay away from fried foods. Stay away from oily foods. So in the evening, it's the time for undressed salads, maybe a piece of whole fruit, and a few nuts. Now, if you put a large bowl of cashews in front of me, I might eat them. So a little self-control, a little self-caring. You can have an extra plum, you can have an extra orange, you can have an extra apple or pear, but only a few nuts. Number 6, stay hydrated by our self-assessment or by needing to urinate every couple of hours while you're awake. Stop drinking fluids after 8 o'clock at night if you get up more than once to use the bathroom. And stretch. Number 7 is stretch in and out of bed. I stretch for about 5 minutes when I first get in bed, and in the morning while I'm still waking up, I stretch for another 5 minutes. And during the day, amble and or walk for 45 minutes or more each day. And it turns out that gardening and being in nature nurtures well-being. So these are choices. These are habits we can cultivate or ignore. And in essence, get enough of the good stuff in so that you can get the bad stuff out. Eat what you can digest, assimilate, and eliminate without immune burden. Alkalinize for life and for love. Because 92% of health is choice. And we are and become what we eat, drink, think, and do. So join me and become tolerant, resilient, and renewed. As a physician, I was a skeptic. I came to debunk this work. I found enough value that I wanted to practice and I wanted to document. And having had the privilege of doing that for decades, I'm more encouraged than ever that we can live well and prosper in this toxic 21st century, but only if we examine and restore our choices. The Alkaline Way to Healthy Weight, a lifetime of choices. May you choose well and wisely. And thank you for your interest. Please share this with others and come back and listen again, as it'll be archived.